Peru saw its third and final presidential debate organized by the National Jury of Elections this Wednesday as the country prepares for general elections. Brazil breaks death records from a surge in COVID-19 cases, forcing cemeteries in Sao Paulo to open at night to face the increase in burials. In Myanmar, protesters took to the streets in different parts of the country to mark the 2-month anniversary of the military takeover, defying fear of lethal violence. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. And before starting our news brief, we would like to welcome our viewers joining us from Antigua and Barbuda, where TeleSUR English is now available on Channel 9 on the CTV cable system. We hope you enjoy our programming and also invite you to follow us on our website and social media pages. Be welcomed. Now we commence our news brief in Peru because the South American nation saw its third and final presidential debate organized by the National Jury of Elections this Wednesday as the country prepares for the April 11th general elections. Each of the debates held over the past 3 days featured 6 of the 18 presidential candidates as a measure imposed to reduce the risk of COVID-19 infection. The debates were made up of 5 thematic blocks focusing on proposed measures to face the COVID-19 pandemic, education, security, public integrity, and the fight against corruption. Peru has been locked into a long-standing political crisis which saw the impeachment of President Martín Vizcarra last year and widespread protests against the corruption of the political elite and calling for a new constitution. The Peruvian Congress has approved a report to sanction former President Martín Vizcarra for secretly vaccinating himself against COVID-19. The Congressional Subcommittee on Constitutional Accusations is seeking to sanction Vizcarra for secretly immunizing himself, with those destined for the clinical trials of the Sinopharm vaccine against COVID-19 in the country. The report includes the accumulated constitutional complaints number 423 and 427, which propose the former president's disqualification from holding public office for 10 years. The report will now pass to the Standing Committee, before which Vizcarra will have to present his defense. In Minneapolis, the U.S., shielding police body camera footage was shown to the jury on Wednesday at the trial of the policeman accused of killing the African-American George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man whose death sparked anti-racism protests around the world. The video taken by the body cams of the 4 police officers involved in Floyd's May 25, 2020 arrest was introduced by prosecutors on the 3rd day of the trial of ex-Minneapolis policeman Derek Chauvin. Chauvin, 45, who was captured on bystander video kneeling on the neck of a handcuffed Floyd for more than 9 minutes, is charged with murder and manslaughter. The body cam videos included the moment Floyd was arrested at gunpoint for allegedly passing a fake $20 bill and his desperate pleas that he can't breathe, and he's pinned face down in the street by the officers. The other 3 former police officers involved in the arrest, Tu Tao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander Ken, are to be tried separately later this year. During the trial, Charles McMillian, witness to George Floyd's arrest, broke down in tears on the stand as he watched the video of Floyd's arrest. And Christopher Martin, a store clerk, said on Wednesday that he regretted accepting the fake $20 bill from George Floyd that led to his arrest and eventual death. Martin, 19th, worked as a cashier at Cub Foods, the store where Floyd used to counterfeit $20 bill to buy a pack of cigarettes.
Partially, the other person that had come in, it kind of seemed like he was trying to scheme, like he knew it was a fake bill and he was trying to get over. I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill, so I thought I'd be doing him a favor.
Okay, trying to help him out.
Cuban and Russian officials began talks Wednesday in Havana on Wednesday, aimed at strengthening bilateral collaboration in various fields. Cuban Deputy Prime Minister Ricardo Cabrizas and his Russian counterpart Yuri Borisov led their respective delegations in exploring areas of interest to both countries. Delegates discussed issues related to the financial, energy, transport, agriculture, communications and health sectors. The Russian Deputy Prime Minister's visit to Cuba is part of the 18th session of the Russia-Cuba Intergovernmental Commission for Economic, Commercial and Scientific Technical Collaboration and is expected to last until Thursday. The Russian official arrived in Cuba from Venezuela after a meeting of the Russia-Venezuela High-Level Intergovernmental Commission in Caracas on Tuesday. Several thousand protesters took to the streets of Brazil's biggest cities this Wednesday to mark the 57th anniversary of the coup that established more than 2 decades of military dictatorship. A group rallied in the city of Rio de Janeiro in front of what was a detention center for political repression during the dictatorship to remember the victims of the regime installed following the 1964 coup. Meanwhile, in other parts of the country, political, social and student movements promoted peaceful street mobilizations and warned that the far-right government of President Jair Bolsonaro was intended to celebrate the date, sparking further fears over the increasing presence of military personnel in top posts of the current administration. In 2019, Bolsonaro sparked outrage after he ordered the military to appropriately commemorate the date, which he does not consider a coup. And there were clashes reported in the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro between government supporters and those commemorating the victims of the military dictatorship installed following the coup 57 years ago. Supporters of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro rallied in front of Copacabana Beach before clashing with those who had mobilized to reject the militarization of the Brazilian government. A group of lawmakers representing opposition parties in Brazil's Chamber of Deputies and Senate announced that they will file a new impeachment request against President Jair Bolsonaro. The legislators argued that the president is trying to misappropriate the military forces in Brazil, with an evident threat to democracy. On Tuesday, Bolsonaro decided to make command changes in the Army, Air Force and Navy after the officers in charge of these bodies resigned following the resignation of the Minister of Defense, Fernando Acevedo. The high-ranking military officer left the government after disagreements with Bolsonaro over the use of the armed forces for political purposes. The request joins other petitions of a similar nature, accusing the president of acting against the free exercise of political, individual and social rights. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. As Brazil breaks death records from a surge in COVID-19 cases, 4 cemeteries of Sao Paulo, one of the Brazilian states most impacted by the pandemic, are now open at night to face the increase in burials. Undertakers wearing full protective equipment dig and bury coffins under nightfall at the Vila Formosa Cemetery located east of the city. Hard-hit Brazil closed out its deadliest month of the coronavirus pandemic by far on Wednesday, with 66,573 COVID-19 related fatalities in March, twice the number of the previous record. An explosion of severe cases has overwhelmed many of the country's hospitals, forcing doctors to make agonizing decisions over whom to give life-saving care and raising fears that the new chapter of the crisis could spread beyond Brazil. The health ministry recorded more than twice as many fatalities in March as Brazil's second deadliest month of the pandemic, July 2020, when there were over 32,000 COVID-19 related fatalities. In Ecuador, the health crisis is worsening as hospitals are on the verge of collapse due to the increase in COVID-19 cases. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, brings us the details.
scandals over the vaccination plan promoted by Lenin Moreno government, the health situation continues to worsen in the country, and hospitals are warning of a new health system collapse.
We are at 145% capacity in the hospital. We have 370 hospitalized COVID patients, and we have 49 in ICU and a waiting list for ICU beds of 70. Also, 7 patients in a critical condition, and as a hospital we have expanded to the extent that was possible, both the cafeteria, endoscopy, military tents, and this is technically the maximum.
In the last few days, patients even spent several hours on the floors of the IAS Quito Sur hospital waiting for a bed.
Quito Sur Hospital is the largest emergency hospital in Pichincha, and we are starting to overflow and are unable to attend to people even though we have annexed all the areas. We are on the verge of saturation.
According to the Social Observatory of Ecuador, there was an increase in deaths from all causes in the country. When comparing the years 2020 and 2021, a third wave of people died during the pandemic, above the historical average recorded between 2015 and 2019. The excess number of people who died in 2020 was 45,569, and so far in 2021 is 9,416. Authorities have even confirmed that temporary hospitals have been reopened due to the increase in cases.
We view the situation with concern. That is why we have decided not to close this center. I believe that we are on the verge of another lockdown.
Ecuador has registered more than 300,000 cases of COVID-19 and more than 16,000 deaths. At the beginning of the pandemic, the government assured that it would secure 18 million vaccine doses by 2021, with which it seeks to vaccinate 60% of the population during this year. However, the plan has drawn a storm of criticism, as the majority of those vaccinated have been people who are not on the front line of the fight against the virus.
Denise Herrera, TeleSUR, Quito, Ecuador.
On Wednesday, Yemen received 360,000 COVID-19 vaccine doses shipped via COVAX, a program launched by the World Health Organization to facilitate countries' access to vaccines. UNICEF representative Philippe Duhamel and the WHO representative Dr. Adham Ismail received the shipment in Aden, joining the Minister of Health and the Deputy Minister of Public Health. The AstraZeneca vaccines will be used on health workers and other priority populations vulnerable to COVID-19. The shipment arrived together with 13,000 safety boxes and more than 1 million syringes that are critical for the safe and effective rollout of the vaccination campaign. This first batch is part of the 1.9 million doses that Yemen will initially receive throughout 2021.
The vaccines have arrived. The next step is the vaccination campaign, and we very much look forward to the start of this vaccination campaign, which will be implemented under the leadership of the Ministry of Health of Yemen, and will continue to be supported by UNICEF, WHO, and all the members that have assembled under the COVAX initiative. So the vaccine is safe, the vaccine saves life, so let's start vaccinating people together.
Mali launched its first immunization campaign against COVID-19 with the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine on Wednesday in the city of Bamako. The day took place at the University Hospital Center in the capital, where the Minister of Health, Fanta Sibi, became the first person in the country to receive the dose. Later, the vaccine was applied to health personnel who fight in the front lines against the coronavirus. At the beginning of March, Mali became the first country in West Africa, the Sahel, to receive more than 390,000 against COVID-19 vaccines through the COVAX mechanism. A devastating surge in COVID-19 deaths in Hungary showed no sign of abating Wednesday, as the daily total set a new record of 302 fatalities. The Central European country is in its fourth week of a new round of lockdown measures aimed at mitigating record-breaking infections, hospitalizations and deaths. This is despite an ambitious vaccination program that has given Hungary the highest vaccination rate in the European Union. The number of inoculations rose over 2 million on Tuesday, more than 20% of the population, and the Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó announced Wednesday that 250,000 doses of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine had arrived overnight in the capital, Budapest. French President Emmanuel Macron announced Wednesday that schools will close next week, and the limited lockdown in place in Paris and other regions will be extended to the whole country in a bid to curb soaring COVID-19 cases. In an address to the nation, Macron said that the current efforts to limit the virus were too limited at the time when the epidemic is accelerating. He announced that schools and daycare centers will close for the next 3 weeks, but this will include 2 weeks of spring holiday. He noted this was not a full lockdown, but that the population had to limit its contacts. He also justified his policy of keeping schools open since the end of the first lockdown in spring 2020, which has received intensified criticism over recent weeks. Travel between different French regions will be banned from the duration of the nationwide light lockdown, while the 7 p.m. curfew currently imposed on 90 regions will be extended to all of the mainland France. We have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Protesters in Myanmar have been on the streets for 2 months since the military seized power. Today again, they are defying the fear of lethal violence and demonstrate against the military junta. In Yangon, shortly after sunrise, a group of young people began by singing solemn songs honoring the more than 500 demonstrators killed so far by security forces. Then they marched through the streets in the highland area of the city, chanting slogans calling for the end of the junta and the return to democracy. On February 1st, the military overthrew elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi, saying last November's election results was fraudulent and there is concerns of being ignored. The takeover has seen massive public resistance, which security forces have attempted to crush through escalating levels of violence, including the now routinely use of live ammunition on protesters. As in many cities and towns in Myanmar, protesters in the way marked 2 months since the military takeover with a march on Thursday, rejecting the junta's rule and calling for the release of the people under arrest, including elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The group of engineers, teachers and students went out and defied fear of confrontation with the military to keep up public opposition to the February 1st seizure of power. Like protesters, activists and citizens, journalists in Myanmar have received the full force of the military's outburst in violence since late February, weeks after the military takeover led by the armed forces. The military regime has arrested at least 46 journalists and 23 remain in jail on charges related to the sedition or violating public order. Security forces have raided several newsrooms and revoked the licenses of many others. Daily internet blackouts and the suspension of mobile phone data services and public Wi-Fi had been the abusive practices used by the military to stop the media from broadcasting what is happening in the country. 2 months after the military takeover, being a journalist became a risk in a country that has a long tradition of reading, whether it is news, magazines, or poetry. On Thursday, attackers gunned down a policewoman in eastern Afghanistan as she was headed to work, the latest targeted killing in the war-torn country. Provincial police spokesperson Fer Khan said the officer shot in the city of Jalalabad was wounded but later died at the hospital. The spokesperson also said that 2 suspects have been arrested by police. Afghanistan has seen a nationwide spike in bombings, targeted killings, and violence on the battlefield as peace negotiations in Qatar between the Taliban and the Afghan government have stalled. The attack comes 3 days after another incident in Jalalabad in which 3 women working to administer polio vaccines in the city were killed. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the attacks in Jalalabad, but eastern Afghanistan has witnessed an increase of attacks by the Islamic State group. In a virtual press conference on Wednesday, the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General stated that UN workers in Mozambique have reported that the security situation remains volatile and is of concern.
Moving on to Mozambique, our humanitarian colleagues there tell us that the escalation of violence in Cabo Delgado province continues to drive massive displacement following the recent attacks by non-state armed groups and ongoing clashes reported in Palma since March 24th. The security situation remains volatile and is of concern to all of us. The UN Migration Agency has already registered about 8,000 people at arrival points in Nangade, Mueda, and Winterpuiz, as well as Pemba. Thousands have arrived today in Pemba and other areas of Cabo Delgado.
The Rwandan High Court Special Chamber for International and Cross-Border Crimes accused businessman Paul Rusesabagina of financing armed groups while leading the Rwandan Movement for Democratic Change. The Office of the Prosecutor of Rwanda proclaimed at least 9 charges against the politician, among which he highlighted the formation of an irregular armed groups belonging to a terrorist group, financing terrorism and acts of terrorism such as murder, kidnapping, among others. According to the prosecution, the defendant admitted to having paid at least $20,000 to the Rwandan National Liberation Forces to bring to feet terrorist acts in eastern Congo. Mount Etna erupted for the 7th time since February 16th from its southeast crater, sending ash clouds into the air that reached 7 kilometers above sea level. Huge orange balls of lava shot up in the air and orange streams rolled down the slopes of the volcano overnight. The eruption from Europe's tallest volcano has not caused problems for the nearby airport in Catania. Local media reported that the volcanic tremors are still strong, as is the infrasonic activity from the southeast crater. Etna is the largest of Italy's 3 active volcanoes, which also includes Stromboli on the Sicilian island of the same name, and Mount Vesuvius near Naples, which last erupted in 1944. And we have come to the end of Business Brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, you can find us and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.